It feels weird to be talking about the last of the light novels, but here we are. Hey, it's Romania Black, and I have spent the last 5 weeks talking about each of the light novels for Kuroko's basketball and going through them one by one. And tonight we are discussing the last light novel, which is the sixth one. And honestly, they have just been like getting better and better. I feel like the light novels decided they're like, okay, well, now that we've eased the audience into what we can do with these light novels and the vignette style of it, let's just go all out. And this novel is no exception. Now, I will say first and foremost, I think the fifth novel is still my favorite because of all the shipping that was in there. But there's some really good shipping in this one. There's some really good follow-ups to previous chapters. There's some stuff tying into the last game that I'm really excited about because it's going to coincide with me just getting ready to read the last game manga. So I'm like, yes, please. And it's talking about the one thing that most mangaka never talk about, but that I'm always excited for: future generations in a sports anime. What? Oh my god. I'm like, yes, please, let's talk about it. So we have these chapters to talk tonight. Luckily, there were no chapters that could not be translated. So I was like, hallelujah. I was like, yes, please. So I was really excited. We get 6 chapters. Basically, there's 5 chapters and then like an extra. And it's great. I'm so excited. But yeah, it's the last of the light novels, y'all. And I'm going to be finishing up next week the manga. So there's still quite a bit of Kuroko's content to come, so we won't be having a live stream for a bit. I'm still waiting on those last 3 Kuroko's things before I do the live stream. So the last 2 audio dramas and the character Bible, I'm gonna wait on those. No rush. We've got plenty to go through this fall, as y'all have seen in my schedule. So I'm just excited. We still have Kuroko's content to come, but we're almost caught up with what I've got to react to, which is crazy, right? But before we get into this light novel, I want to give a very quick, very big shout out. One to Truck for getting this all together. If you are a patron and you have subscribed to the Discord, which I would highly encourage you to do if you have Patreon, then you can go to the Kuroko channel on Patreon and you can see on the Discord a link to all of these light novels so that you can read them yourselves. Because even though I spend like 45 minutes to an hour talking about them, there's still plenty that I just don't have time to discuss because I want you to go read them. So if you get on the Discord and go to the Kuroko's channel, it is pinned. There's a pin that has the Google Doc that has all these different light novels. You can go read yourselves. But I want to give a special thanks to Truck for putting those all together and to Midori-chan on Tumblr for translating. So, mwah. Brilliant. Brilliant. There's actually a lot of images that came with this light novel that you guys will see. I'll demonstrate with the chapters. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, we should just go ahead and dive in and talk about the treasure trove of information that this light novel has because it was absolutely wonderful. So first and foremost, the very first chapter is called Formation Team Starkey, which I remember back in the anime, I was like, what is Starkey in the movie? And it's actually the initials of each of the school. You have Shitoku, you have To'o, you have Rakuzan, you have Kaijo, and you have Yosen that make Starkey. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I think that's fun. It's also like Stark is black, so it kind of goes with Kuroko's basketball. You get the color black in there, or the shade black, if you prefer. But yeah. So the chapter starts with Kasamatsu giving Moriyama a tour of his college campus, which is really fun. Automatically, anytime a story decides to talk about the post-canon, like when characters graduate and go off to college, I'm like, yes. Free is an amazing sports anime series because it goes beyond high school and into college, and I love it. Run with the Wind is great because it deals with college to begin with, and so it just opens up a lot of doors. But I liked that we automatically started with Kasamatsu giving Moriyama a tour of his campus. Apparently, they went to 2 different campuses. Moriyama chose a more rural campus to go to, and Kasamatsu is basically in Tokyo. So that's fun. I like, though, that instantly Kasamatsu has to drag Moriyama along because every time there's a girl there, Moriyama's like, hey, how's it going? He's been working on his pickup skills. He says right from the beginning, he's like, I've been working on talking to girls. And Kasamatsu's like, oh my god, cool, good for you. We'll get more into that. But Moriyama is trying to hit on like every college girl. And he's like, you have a lot of hot girls here, like way more than my school. And Kasamatsu's like, I don't even know what to do with that. So they meet up with Koji, who is also attending the same college as Kasamatsu. And while they're eating lunch, Gabori reveals that he has this very big interest in astronomy and astrology. And Kasamatsu's like, oh, okay. And he's worried about the weather and that it's going to mess up like this planned mixer that Moriyama has like planned with him to get all these girls together on campus. And Moriyama says that he's like, I'm afraid that like the weather is going to be like too good for me to go stargazing, so I can't go to the mixer. So Kasamatsu, how about you go with Moriyama instead of me? And Kasamatsu is very against the idea of going to the mixer. He does not want to go at all. And Kabori reveals that like in the process of them talking, he reveals that his family has like a villa he's going to go stargazing at. And Moriyama thinks that Kabori is wealthy, and he's like, well, it's a small villa, so he kind of denies it. But Kasamatsu, he says that hearing about Moriyama working on his pickup lines with women and Kabori's fascination with astrology, he realizes that he kind of feels lame, is the sad thing. Kasamatsu's like, I feel like I'm boring. He's like, I've spent my whole life just interested in school, home, and basketball. You guys have all these hobbies and outside interests. And he's like, I kind of don't have anything. And now that he's graduated, he thinks that it's time for him to expand his horizons and pick up a hobby for himself. And so in the meantime, he's joined the college basketball club to keep up with the sport that he loves, but he wants to try to expand his horizons and think about possible hobbies he can also do while he's in college. And so he debates for a moment about playing the guitar, and I was like, oh, Kasamatsu, do not become that guy with the acoustic guitar. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just don't start singing Matchbox 20. Don't do it, Kasamatsu. But he's afraid. Kasamatsu is afraid that he doesn't understand music well enough to be good at the guitar like he should be. And so Moriyama's like, oh, well, he's like, there's lots of other simple ways and things that you can do for a hobby. You don't have to play guitar. And Kasamatsu's like, well, then, like what? And he goes, oh, well, hitting on girls. And in all caps, Kasamatsu says, hell no. Look, the other guys try to tell him that it's time that he needs to talk to girls, and it's a big part of his coming of age now that he's in college. And what's so frustrating to me is that I wish that the mangaka could just come out and say it, that Kasamatsu is not interested in women. It's so obvious. Every bit of extra material has been like, Kasamatsu wants nothing to do with girls. He has such great chemistry with guys. All the guys he talks to, it's like that. He's like, done. Got a great conversation piece going. Anytime he tries to talk to a girl, it fails miserably. I'm like, just make Kasamatsu gay and get it over with. Because he is. He just really is. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm like, mangaka, just grow a pair and let him be gay, and it's fine. And we'll talk about all the other reasons why he should be gay in this novel, because it's so apparent. But I'm like, fine. Just, ugh. But Kasamatsu agrees. He bows to peer pressure and decides that he'll try talking to girls just so he can say he's accomplished something. But he has trouble even looking at women. Like, I'm reading Heaven Official's Blessing at the same time. It's a Chinese Donmai, and there is a character in that series that from the get-go does not like women. He just very much is kind of like Kasamatsu. He wants nothing to do with them. But then you find out later on in the story that he does like women. It's just like one specific woman he's liked, and that's fine. But Kasamatsu isn't even at that. He doesn't even want to look at women. He doesn't want anything to do with them. I'm like, it's so coded. There's so much queer coding with Kasamatsu. I'm like, just let him be gay and let's get it over with. I don't think anybody else on the team would care, and Moriyama just needs to leave him alone. So, but anyway, Kabori and Moriyama, they decide to go to the movies with Kasamatsu because he's like, I need practice looking at women. And they're like, well, where are we going to practice looking at women where it's not creepy? And he's like, well, we'll go to a movie, and there's a romance movie I want to see, and then I'll just look at the women in that, and maybe that'll help. And so they're like, okay. So they go to the movies with him, but Kasamatsu, because he's a baka, doesn't read the description properly, and instead of it being a romance movie, it's like Poltergeist. It's like The Ring. Like, the girl in the movie is like the girl from The Ring, and it freaks them out. And so they get scared watching the movie, and as they get freaked out, they hear this scream behind them, and it freaks them out even more. And it turns out the person that screams is Okamura from Yosen. So they're like, oh, what are you doing here? And Okamura reveals that he was rejected by a girl that he confessed to. and he gets really upset. Like, Okamura, he has like this big complex about women not liking him, and it was kind of in the manga and the anime a little bit, and this kind of expands upon it, but he starts crying to all of them and tells them, he's like, I'm not normal. It's true that I'm big, but compared to Murasaki Bara, I'm still way cuter. I love that he's like, I'm cuter than Murasaki Bara. Why don't I have girlfriends? Like, does Murasaki Bara get confessed to a lot? That kind of opened up the gates of being like, does Mura get confessed to a lot? And he just turns them down because they don't have food. Murasaki Bara has beautiful hair and he's tall. I could see it, but I felt bad for Okamura and Moriyama instantly bonds with him. He's like, yes. He's like, you understand. Like, it's so hard to talk to women. Like, we should do our best. And Moriyama, he like comforts Okamura, like pats him on the back. And Okamura's like, you understand me. And Moriyama's like, I do. And they have like this bonding moment over being rejected by women. And so then Okamura proceeds to tell them about how his woes have been mounting up since he's left Yosen, because he's graduated and come to the same college as Kasamatsu as well. And he says, in Tokyo, I thought first I should try to buy some nice clothes, but I didn't know where to go to, and size was an issue, and I was troubled, so I thought I'd text Murasaki Bara, who was originally from Tokyo, and ask him about it. But this is what he sent me back as a reply. Troublesome. That's all he texted back! And he's like, why? Who would say troublesome to a heartfelt SOS message, even though he should come to understand my trouble in finding clothes my size? I even showed him clothing stores when he first came to Akita, so why is it troublesome? What's worse, that news of me trying to find clothes got around to the club, and another underclassman said, well, the first step is to get plastic surgery. Am I so bad that I have to get rid of my chin? I felt so bad for Okamura in this, because I get it. Like, I've had friends that are really tall, or like one of my friend's dads in grade school, like, wears a size 20 shoe and is huge. He's a giant. And he had to go to like a special store just to get pants. Like, I get Okamura's plight. But Murasaki Bara just being like, nah, I don't want to mess with it. And the fact that Okamura helped him out, I'm like, oh, so in character. What a brat. Murasaki Bara, how dare you? But I felt so bad for Okamura. Like, he's the biggest softie in this. I'm like, oh, dude, I'm sorry. So in the end, thanks to one of his underclassmen, Himuro, he's able to solve his clothes dilemma, and it says here, Himuro gets information from the unconcerned Murasaki Bara, meaning that Himuro had to go and like pry it out of Murasaki Bara. I bet it wasn't hard. I bet he like offered him a Maribo and was like, so where does he need to go? Oh, he needs to go here. If I wasn't shipping Himuro so hard with Nijimura now, if I hadn't moved on to the Nijimura-Himuro ship, I would have been all about this interaction with Murasaki Bara, but I'm still on the Nijimura and Himuro bandwagon, so go see last week's volume if you want more info on me shipping the hell out of that, because it's amazing. But yeah, so Okamura's story got passed down to the point where his fellow classman Fukui heard it, and he sent a harsh message to Okamura that said, don't ask your underclassmen weird questions. For a gorilla, the best outfit is being naked. Which I think it was very reasonable they asked Himuro, and I think Himuro, living in America as long as he has, I don't think minded to help him. So he talks things out with the others, and they all leave the theater. And what's interesting is that they leave the theater, and Moriyama leaves, and Kasamatsu is left with Okamura. And so there's this really sweet moment, again, where I'm like, mangaka, just make Kasamatsu gay and let's get it over with. Because there's this really sweet moment when they're walking back, Kasamatsu and Okamura, they have this really good banter, this really good chemistry. And am I shipping Okamura with Kasamatsu? I like Kasamatsu and Kisei more, but there's this really good moment where Okamura invites him over to have cocoa. Just drink cocoa with him, and Kasamatsu's like, okay. And they have instant chemistry. I mean, Kasamatsu has literally great chemistry with any guy character, but they have like instant chemistry. They agree. And Kasamatsu is amazed at how good Okamura can make cocoa for himself. And Okamura's like, oh, well, I taught myself to do this, like as a way to pick up girls. And again, Kasamatsu laments it's yet another example of people doing new things for themselves, and he doesn't have any interesting thing he can do for himself. He's like, all I do is eat, sleep, and play basketball. I don't have any cool hobbies. And so Kasamatsu says, I got into college and I thought I would try something new. I want to expand my world a bit or something, but it hasn't exactly worked out well. I didn't think I'd be this clumsy at it. And it's so sad because Kasamatsu, it's like you are Knuff. You don't have to do anything extra. And then Okamura, he's like, well, it's hard, taking on a new challenge. But he's like, it is hard to make this. They call it a flowery debut in college. He's like, it's hard to do that. And he tells Kasamatsu he could work together with him to help make him popular. But Kasamatsu's like, I don't want to be popular. He's like, I don't want to try just becoming popular. And so then, like, they're outside, like, at this point, they've been drinking the cocoa and they're getting ready to leave the apartment, like, Kasamatsu's about to go home. And at that moment, there's this really creepy voice that comes out of, like, the shadows around them. And it's like, well then, shall I tell you of an opportunity to make that change for yourself, Kasamatsu? Said a cool voice resounding on the silent road. It's creepily. It's very creepy, but we find out it's Imayoshi. Imayoshi's been waiting in the dark alley for Okamura to come home. And you're like, why are you here? Like, they're like, what are you doing here, Imayoshi? And so he was waiting outside of Okamura's apartment to give him a map. How long he's been there, we don't know. Why Imayoshi couldn't just, like, mail it to him or call him and tell him he was coming, we don't know. I definitely see why Hanamiya is paired with Imayoshi. Because he is kind of creepy. I get why people ship Hanamiya with him, because they're like kind of a match in that regard. But he gives him this map, and he tells Kasamatsu and Okamura to show up at noon where the map tells them to. And the two are kind of curious, so they're like, well, do you want to go? I mean, I got nothing else going on. Let's just do this. So they show up, and of course, it's a street ball tournament. And Imayoshi is there along with Miyagi and Higuchi from Rakuzan. And so it turns out that Imayoshi lured Okamura and inadvertently Kasamatsu to this registration tournament that is to qualify a team to play against the Jabberwocks in last game. And Imayoshi thought that the two of them would do great in joining the registration squad. He also says that he wanted them to feel better, and he's like, well, you guys like basketball, so this will make you feel better. It's creepy, but there is sentiment behind it, so I'll forgive him creepily stalking outside Okamura's apartment to give them the map. Because it was for a good cause somehow, right? So Imayoshi says that if they win the tournament, it would be a great way to show off to the girls at the college, which that completely like makes Okamura's day. He's like, yes. He's like, I want girls' attention. That'll be great. But then it says that Kasamatsu's, whose heart is actually not into persuading ladies, is more interested in winning so he can get the chance to play an American team for the challenge of it. And I'm like, again, the story and the series could not make it more apparent that Kasamatsu is not into ladies. But I love this moment where Imayoshi tells Kasamatsu, he's like, you keep talking about having all these hobbies. This is your hobby. It's basketball. And that's all that it has to be. He's like, you don't have to pick up all these extra things. Just do what you like. And if basketball is what you like, devote yourself to it, and that's all you need. And it's really sweet. And Kasamatsu's like, well, I never thought you'd be the one to push me. And he's like, well, I'm doing you a big favor. It's going to cost you big. I like that he gets some like Kansai Ben in his accent there, because everybody was telling me that Imayoshi has a Kansai Ben accent. And at first I was like, I don't get it. But then reading the dialogue and the way they put yas in there and like, you owe me big. It's like, I suddenly see where that accent comes out at. And so it's great. And he's like, well, I'll pay you back during today's game. You plan on winning, right? And he's like, you got quite the mouth. I'll be counting on you then. I'm like, I love that. The two of them throw these arrogant and bold remarks at each other, but they're so confident. And then Kasamatsu, he didn't just have confidence, but the excitement within that he couldn't stop. It wasn't so often that he'd be chosen by Imayoshi to be part of a team to fight with. But now there was no choice but to go with it. So the team ends up qualifying, obviously, like we see in last game. And Kasamatsu is the one that comes up with the name Starkey. So I love it. I love it's this moment he shines as a leader and he realizes that basketball is his calling and that's the way he'll expand his horizons. It was such a cute chapter, but I was like, at this point, the series is just telling us, just so you know, Kasamatsu, not into the ladies, instant chemistry with guys, basketball, dumbbell. Go with it. So it was a really cute chapter, but I'm going to be honest, y'all. The next chapter is my favorite. This chapter is cute. The next chapter is my favorite. Chapter 2 is called The Next Generation. And I was like, wait, what are we doing? What is happening? So the chapter starts out with Tepe in LA for rehab. And so the opening paragraph, it's really well written, so I wanted to read it verbatim. It says, 6:15 a.m. Before sunrise, the lounge was quiet. Bringing a chair close to the wall glass window, Kiyoshi Tepe gazed at the street of houses enveloped by the dim light of Los Angeles. From the 8th floor of the hospital, he could see the light of the people starting to move as they began their new day. Just imagine the people under those lights preparing for their day somehow warmed his heart. Kiyoshi softly gazed down below his eyes and with his fingertips brushed over his beloved cell phone in his hand. So it's very sweet. Tepe's there getting rehab in LA. Riko calls him, and we find out she calls him a few times a month, which is cute. And he's been in LA a few months with his knee surgery. So Riko informs him that they're doing recruitment for the new year and that they've had 40 forms turned in thanks to Kogane's strategies, but she's not sure how many of the 40 will actually stay after the first practice. Hyuga's really excited about the prospects, though, and the Winter Cup performance apparently helped out with recruitment, and Tepe gets really excited, and he's happy to hear that she's so excited and doing well as well. So the first day of tryouts happened, and Kagami, who apparently hasn't left for America yet, but Kagami doesn't announce he's leaving for America until the last game, so I'm not exactly sure when that falls on the timeline. I don't want to know. We'll find out next week when I read the Last Game manga. But at this point, Kagami's not left for America yet, or he's not decided fully yet. Which I guess with the timeline of when new school years start in America versus Japan, that could make sense. So we'll see, right? We'll see. But he's now entering with Kuroko into their second year, which is so cute. I love it. And they talk about how there's more that filled out forms than originally. So they now have about 50 people coming to practice, and several comment on how cute Riko is, and they're excited to have a female coach. And I'm like, damn right, you get those compliments in a Riko. She deserves it. And they're all freaking out about the first practice, and Kagami and Kuroko, they reminisce and note how they were thinking the same thing at the same time. Like Riko asks them all to strip for the first time, and all 50 of them are like, strip, get naked, what? And she's like, no. And Kagami and Kuroko were like, remember when we had to strip for Riko? I do, ha ha ha, weren't those fun times? It's great. And then Hyuga and Izuki show up, and the thing about it is, this joke, they show up and look around, and Hyuga's like, what a view, whispered Hyuga Junpei as he watched the half-naked recruit members being checked by Riko. And Izuki's like, that sounds wrong, Hyuga. He's like, seeing shirtless guys and saying it's a view, and Hyuga's like, not like that, the number of them, the number! Oh, you mean it like that? And I'm like, poor Hyuga. Hyuga is constantly thought of in this series as being into guys, and he has to constantly deny it. I'm like, dude, you can be bisexual. It's fine. But I just he's like, the number, Izuki, the number. It's funny. And so apparently winning the Winter Cup was a big deal since the school itself is not that old. It was their first major sports victory, which is so kind of neat, right? Because, I mean, in some sports anime, when they win at the end or if they win the banner or whatever, the school's like, oh, yay, good job. But they also have a track team that's won nationals and a football team or something. They're not the sole sport that's won nationals for the entire school body, so they kind of share the glory with other teams, like Haikyuu, for example. But in this case, the school is new, the team is new, and it's their very first big sports victory, so it's a big deal. They get news of the school rejoicing, they're held numerous interviews, and there's a lot of celebration going on throughout the entire campus. It's a big deal. And so New Year holidays begin, and Hyuga and the others saw from the entrance gate, it says, the first day of school after winter vacation, there was a banner hanging from the school building that said, congratulations to the basketball club for winning at nationals. It said Hyuga and the others happily and embarrassingly walked under the banner, and the moment they walked into their classroom, they were bombarded with questions by their classmates. So as soon as they got back from New Year's, there was a big banner at the school celebrating their victory, and everybody was instantly asking them all about it. Kogane Shinji especially had a lot of people around him, and because he had also helped talk on behalf of his best friend, the silent Mitobe Renosuke, his voice grew hoarse before the morning assembly. I love that visual of Kogane just speaking so much that he gets hoarse before the morning assembly even happens. So the entire ordeal gives them a lot of interviews and notoriety, and they're all kind of like embarrassed about it, and I love their modesty. It's really super cute. And Furihata and the other now second years are really nervous about being senpai and kind of living up to this standard that has been set before them. So Kagami doesn't seem very worried about it because he's not used to the whole senpai kohei system and by being in America so long. And Kuroko notes that he's been a senpai to Kisei before, so he's like, if I can be a senpai to Kisei who's a generation of miracles, then you'll be fine, Furihata. But we have these new recruits, right? And one of them has Kagami all in a tizzy. One of the new recruits. And it's this guy that Kagami calls the breakfast bastard, which is so good. His name is Asahina Daigo-kun. Kuroko politely corrected. He's like, he's not breakfast bastard, he's Asahina Daigo. And so Kagami calls him Asa Meshi Yaro. Asa means morning, and Meshi is a casual term for food. So morning food, Asa Meshi, is breakfast, right? So instead of Asahina, he says Asa Meshi, which is kind of hilarious. I like the idea of him of Asahina being called breakfast bastard. It's fun. So Asahina Daigo is one of the first years that Riko has her eyes on. He's 180 centimeters tall and weighs 75 kilograms. He was a student with long limbs extending from his body. As for basketball experience, he participated in the national middle school tournament, and he at first seems like the silent type. Even during club recruitment, he came to the basketball club booth and only spoke what was necessary. Along with his expressionless face, you would think he was a quiet person. So he's quiet like Kuroko, but he's like a big, tall, hunking guy. So it's interesting, right? And apparently he went to nationals in middle school, which is, now that Teiko's out of the picture, it's a free-for-all, right? When he did speak, it was after everyone had finished running and the second and third years were doing their regular practice, while the first years were doing muscle training. Riko had ordered them to do 5 sets of abdominal and back muscle training, and after he had finished his third set, Asahina stood up and spoke to her. He's like, I can do the 2 remaining sets just fine, so can you let me go to the regular practice? He's just like, I got this, so let's go. Bump me up, coach. And she didn't think a first year would say that. Even the other first years didn't think somebody would talk back to the famous coach. They stopped their training to watch the 2 of them. And Riko's like, well, this is to build stamina and stat numbers, so you should try doing the full set. And Asahina's like, so there's no need for stat numbers, right? And she's like, why? And he's like, well, you should know all of the numbers from the shirtless body check we did earlier. So we took off our shirts so you could see them properly. Otherwise, there'd be no point, right? So can you stop doing things that are useless and time-consuming? I mean, he seems quiet, but then he's also like straight to the point and speaks his mind. So he's kind of like Kagami a little bit. And so the first years are all like, oh my God, this guy is so bold opposing the coach. And the upperclassmen like slowly turn. They're like, what is this kid doing? And Riko just looks at him. And so Asahina, thinking that she's at a loss, keeps talking and says, also, I can be useful to the team. I'm better than the current people who are bench warmers. And he looks towards Furihata and the other second-year trio. So this little shit like comes in and he's like, I'm better than these guys. Can I just jump right in? Like the nerve. And then Hyuga's like, man, he's saying all these cocky things. He's kind of like Kagami. And Kagami's like, Captain, I never said such things. And Izuki's like, well, even if you didn't say it, your attitude sure did. And then Tsuchida's like, well, I mean, you were really mean towards Kuroko, too. And they're like, now that you mention it, you were. And Kagami's like, what? No, I wasn't. He's like, well, I wasn't that mean, I think. And then Kagami's like, damn that guy. He's underestimating me. He's not only underestimating me, but he's giving me the stink eye. And Asahina's just glaring at him. And so they decide to let Asahina join in the practice. So, not understanding what Riko was thinking, after hearing Asahina's rather straightforward statement, she let him join the second and third year's practice, and just as he said, Asahina did possess some skill, while his passing and shooting were well balanced, and he did in fact surpass Furihata and the others. Then, whenever there was free time, he would glare at Kagami. And Kagami's like, I thought he was just asking for a fight. Like, if he has something to say, just say it. Like, Kagami's like, why are you staring at me, kid? Like, it's hilarious. And so Kogani and Hyuga comment after practice how Furihara, they are proud of Furihara. They stood his ground and, like, didn't just say, like, you know, oh yeah, I'm weak, whatever. And then Asahina, they say he's likely hostile towards Kagami because he's playing the same position. And he's going to have to compete with Kagami for it, you know, unless Kagami moves to America or something. Unless that happens, but what are the odds of that, right? Right? So the next day, of the 50 applicants, one shows back up. And I'll give you two guesses who. If you said Asahina, you'd be correct. So Asahina is the only one that comes back after day one. Everybody else got too intimidated and they didn't want to keep up with the training schedule. But with that being said, there was one other applicant who ends up showing up. He's a late addition, a painfully shy first year named Yagi Yuta. And Yuta has no experience, and at the first practice he's already wore out, but Kuroko stays behind to help run with him. It made me think instantly of Haiji helping out Prince running in Run with the Wind because he just helps him run. And I get a very similar like Kuroko Kagami vibe with Asahina and Yuta right off the bat. Like I instantly think of them. And so Kagami's wondering if Yagi is going to be able to make this. And so Kuroko, like, meanwhile helps hold down his legs while he does abdominal training. And even though Kagami knew he was trying his best, from an outsider's perspective, he's like, I don't know if Yuta's gonna make this or not. So it seemed like a huge difference between him and Asahina, who had joined the upperclassmen in regular practice. As he thought of that, Kagami turned his view to Asahina, who was glaring at Kagami. Unable to tell what he's feeling, he stared at Kagami with a rude look. And Kagami's about to get mad at this, but then he remembers something. He's like, oh yeah, Kuroko said if you see something you don't want to see, you should imagine them as pumpkins. So yeah, he's a pumpkin. Pumpkin, pumpkin, pumpkin. Wait, why a pumpkin? Can't he be a cucumber? No. Are bamboo shoots in season right now? And so, like, while he's thinking that, he's like, well, glaring at him, Kagami continued to think of him as a bunch of spring vegetables in his mind and said he's an asparagus. No, he's a potato! And so, meanwhile, Riko tells Asahina that he is going to be Yuta's new partner. Now, Asahina coldly looks at Riko's side and focuses attention towards the waiting Yagi. Yagi bowed his head in apology, but Asahina showed no reaction and turned his glance back to Riko. I'm going to have Kuroko-kun observe Yagi-kun's form from the side, so he needs a partner to receive the pass. I thought it'd be good for both of you as first years to understand the passing rhythm, okay? So Riko smiled as if she'd already like made the decision. She's like, you're not going to argue with me on this. And she's like, okay, I'll leave you to it. And Yagi like bows to Asahina and he's like, I look forward to working with you, Asahina-kun. And Asahina just stares him down and squints his eyes. And he's just like, and he tells him, you should quit basketball. Someone who sucks like you would only bring down the team. I'm serious about wanting to go to nationals. That's why I hate guys who suck because they just take up our time. And Yuta's like, oh, I'm sorry. And he apologizes and hangs his head low. But he doesn't have any signs of antipathy, just shame. And then Asahina's like, you're not even serious, so don't get the others involved. It's bad even towards the manager. And that's when they're like, are you saying that Yagi-kun isn't serious? And Asahina's like, well, can't you just tell? And then he realizes that someone talked to him. And he's like, who just said that? And it was Kuroko. And Asahina hadn't noticed Kuroko this entire time. And he's like, when did you get here? And Kuroko's like, I have been here the whole time. You just didn't notice. And then Kuroko gets mother hen because you could tell that Kuroko instantly bonds with Yuta. Like Yagi Yuta, like Kuroko's like on him like a mother hen instantly. And he tells Asahina, he's like, please take your words back from earlier. He looked back at Asahina. Yagi-kun joined the basketball club because he was serious about wanting to play. And Yagi's like, oh, Kuroko-senpai. He's like, it's true, I'd just be a burden. I'm sorry for taking up your time too. And Asahina's like, well, see, he admits it. Since Senpai has seen him up close, you should understand that it's best, right? He can't even run much from road running, so it's decided he should quit. And Kuroko's like, it's not decided. The one who decides is himself. And Asahina's like, well, then what if he continued without quitting the club? He'll never stand on the court. Even if he aims for nationals, we don't know if he'll be useful, if he'll just take up our time. It's better to prioritize training the stronger players. You should understand, right? Manager senpai? Asahina thought Kuroko was one of the managers. I was like, no. And Kuroko's like, I'm not a manager. I'm a player. And Kuroko's like, I'm a player. And then Asahina's like, well, with that appearance, of course, you'd want to stand up for him. And I was like, oh, shit. I'm like, Asahina, did you not watch Nationals last year? Did you not know about the Phantom Sixth Man? I don't think you did. Because I'm like, how did you not know Kuroko and who he was? And for him to say, like, well, no wonder you took up to him. You didn't stand out like him. And then Kagami's like, would you cut it out? I love it says, a displeased voice as if it was crawling out of the depths of hell. Like a beast, Kagami grabbed Asahina's shirt collar. Even though I got a lot of things I want to say to you, I've kept quiet and listened, but now you've really said it. This guy! And then Hyuga breaks it up before Kagami gets in trouble. So the others get back to practice, and Kuroko encourages Yuta that there's more to Seiren's club than meets the eye. And he's like, Asahina will figure it out. The strength of Seiren's basketball is a bit different than what he thinks. I loved it. I was like, I want more of Asahina. I want Asahina and Yuta. I love the idea of these new first years joining the group, the two individuals. I love the idea of Kuroko coaching him and like that idea of passing on your knowledge and your skills to the next generation. I love it. I think it's amazing. I worry a little bit about Asahina because Teppei's not there as a buffer. And if Kagami leaves, then it's literally going to be like Kuroko and Hyuga manhandling him. I don't know, but I love Asahina's character. I love that he's kind of bratty and like kind of snobby and is like just wants to do good. And then Yuta is just the most precious. Like, yes, please. It was great. It was a great chapter. I freaking loved it. So then chapter 3 is called Time of Departure. And it's basically about several of the third years graduating from each of their individual schools and what that's like. So the chapter starts out with Imayoshi graduating from Toho. He is leaving his dorm, and so he gathers up all of his things, and he talks about how it's like a bird leaving the nest, and he doesn't want to leave any trace of himself behind. And then he meets up with his classmate, the vice captain of Toho, which is Susa Yoshinori. And they pass by the gym on the way to graduation. I love this part. They run into Wakamatsu, who's practicing hard. He's now going to be, the new captain. And he tells them that Sakurai is on his way to practice too. And just then, the doors squeak open. And Almine shows up to practice. And I was like, on his own, came by himself. And Wakamatsu's even surprised. And they're like, have you decided to come to practice? And Almine, of course, because he's a big old tsundere, he's like, oh no, I just came to try out these new basketball shoes that I just got, for no reason. And he's like, I want to move around a bit, so you be my opponent. My body's warmed up, so you ready to go? I was like, yes, Almine going to practice, yes. And of course, Wakamatsu's like, you bastard, is this how you act to your senpai? How dare you? But I love it. It's all for show. Like, Wakamatsu acts like he's going to have a fight with Almine, but they're just like, he's really excited that he's decided to come to practice. It's so cute. And so Imayoshi and Susa exchange glances at each other like, all right, this may work out. Cool. And they're like, who knew that Almine, when did he grow up? You never know what will happen in life. And then Susa, it's like they sound like grandfathers who are surprised that their grandsons have grown up. And Imayoshi lets out this chuckle, and they're looking at the cherry blossoms, and Imiyoshi's like, well, they all eventually bloom, don't they? So cute! So then we cut over to Kaijo, where Kasamatsu, Kobori, and Moriyama are getting ready for graduation as well. Apparently at Kaijo High School, there is a tradition that the morning of graduation, there's this custom where the graduating students, they wear small corsages on their chest as proof of being an enrolled student, but they get put on by an underclassman. And so putting on the corsages on the graduating students is mainly the job of student council members, but they also allow members of the club to put them on their senpais as a way of thanking them. And so at the time, Kasamatsu has not received a corsage yet. Moriyama suggests that he go find a girl to give it to him, but he's not about that life. And so Kasamatsu, he starts looking around to try to find somebody to put the corsage on him, but there's nobody there. And so Hayakawa was locked on to giving one to Moriyama, so he couldn't use him as an option. And so it's sad. Kasamatsu starts getting sad, being like, I'm not going to receive a corsage from one of my teammates. Oh no. And then who shows up? Kisei. Kisei looked at Kisei with a face of bewilderment. And Kisei admits that he was up all night thinking of something to say to Kasamatsu since they were graduating. And Kasamatsu tells him not to worry about it. And so instead, Kisei just gets all worked up. And he's like, well, Kasamatsu-senpai, thank you very much. And it says, and then the ace decorated the former captain's chest with a corsage. I was like, yes! Just let Kisei and Kasamatsu be a couple. Just let it happen. Let it happen! Yes, I love it. So we got to Yosen. Yosen's high school graduation ceremony is really solemn. Like, it's inside an auditorium, and there's this pipe organ, which it's a Christian school, right? It's a ministry school, so there's a pipe organ, and there's all these, like, choirs and graduating students, like, singing in choir. It's great. And then, like, the calm atmosphere continues, and then all the students, like, watch this person go up to the podium to make their speech, and it's Lou. Like, Lou and Okamura are the two presenters for Yosen, which is interesting. So, like, Himuro, it shows him in the audience like this mother hen. And so Lou's worried about Okamura presenting, but he does well for a while. And then he starts talking about his regrets and how he wasn't popular with the ladies in the school. And then Okamura literally starts sobbing at the podium during graduation. And everybody's like trying to calm him down. And he like talks about how Fukui is more popular. And then people in the audience start agreeing and sobbing too. They're like, you're right, Okamura. He is more popular than us. And it's like, what the hell's happening? And it says the solemn atmosphere was quickly blown away as cries of passionate boys filled the auditorium, as well as the other students that turned speechless. And then I remember that this is an all-boys school, so it's just all these sobbing boys. It's ridiculous. In the midst of the chaos, the basketball club coach, as well as the PE teacher, Araki Masako, used her favorite bamboo sword on Okamura until he left the stage. So she like whacks him until he goes away. It's great. So meanwhile, Atsushi's just yawning, being like, this is just how our school is. And then we go to Rakuzan, where Mabuchi is like, he's giving... Okay, this is the part that got me. Rakuzan's having their graduation ceremony, and Mabuchi's like, oh my god, you're so cool, your speech was amazing. And I was like, of course Mabuchi would be complimenting. Akashi gave the farewell speech to the graduating students. Akashi's a freaking first year, but they nominated him to give the closing address to the third years of Rakuzan. Like, why? Akashi's like, I can't lose, not even in the rights to give graduation speeches to classes that are not my own. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? He's like, the guys just, they wanted me to give the speech. What can I say? And Mabuchi's like, wow, Sei-chan, you can really see through everything. You're so good. So it says here that compared to before the Winter Cup, Mabuchi thought that Akashi smiled more often. And when he smiled before, Mabuchi wondered if it was a real smile or just a tool to make others let their guard down. But now, according to Mabuchi, Akashi's smiles have no sign of deception. It was as if a transparent filter around him had been removed. Which makes sense. And then he's like, were you waiting for me to ask Mayuzumi to give the speech? And Hayama's like, yeah, he wasn't there when we were giving out diplomas. So Mayuzumi didn't show up for the third year's retirement ceremony. He hasn't shown himself since then. It's as if he disappeared. And Akashi actually makes a joke. They ask Akashi if they've seen Mayuzumi, and Akashi's like, wait, who is he? And they're like, and they start questioning whether he actually existed. And then Akashi laughs, telling the joke. And it says, for the first time, Mabuchi saw Akashi's shoulders slightly shake as he laughed. Like he really got their gourd. I was like, oh my gosh. I freaking loved it. It's great. So then we have finally Shitoku. And the Shitoku High School Basketball Club, they have a thank you party in the gym at the end. I like that we see how each school celebrates their farewell and graduation. Shitoku's have a talent show in the gymnasium, and all the second years dress up as a pop idol group with skirts and t-shirts and perform this big dance number. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's funny because Shitoku is supposedly the school that's famous for being serious and hardworking, and yet all the second years are like dressing up as pop idols and having this like fake number go on. And Takao, of course, is the MC for the entire event. Of course, Takao is the MC. He's just getting the biggest kick out of it of all. So Nakatani, the coach, stands up to give the presentation. He gives this short but impassioned speech, and he blushes and coughs at the end about them all leaving, which is really cute. And they all thank Coach Nakatani. And then at the very end of the party, Takao announces that there's going to be a piano accompaniment by Midorima. And he plays the piano for all of them. It's really cute. Like they all start singing, and then the piano is being played, and then all the third years start crying, very Haikyuu Seijo style. And it's really sweet. Like, I absolutely loved it. I was like, that's so good. So then we have chapter 4, which is the miracle that crossed the ocean. And what's interesting is it is a Teiko chapter. We started out the novel with a Starkey chapter, not a Teiko one. So I was a little confused, but we do have a Teiko chapter. And so Teiko, because they are wealthy, are going to a training camp for basketball in Hawaii. In Hawaii, of all places. They're going to Hawaii in August. Yes. The first string regulars of Teiko Basketball Club are heading to the National Middle School Tournament known as Zinchu, which is the Zinkoku Chugoko Basketball Tournament or National Middle School Tournament. And it's being held in Hawaii. So Kisei has just joined the club this past spring. So this is like the end of second year. This is the end of second year. Nijimura has graduated at this point, but it's the end of second year. And they're really looking forward to this tournament. And Kuroko says he's never flown before. And so he's kind of nervous. He's like, I've never flown. And Almine teases him, being like, well, Tetsu, do you know? Before you get on the plane, they'll have to do a full body check. He's like, you may be turned away from Hawaii because of illegal entry because your presence is so weak that when you board the plane, no official may see you. And Kuroko gets freaked out. And then Almine starts to smirk at him. And he's like, Almine-kun, I was fooled by you with that. I was like, aww. And then, of course, Midorima's like, of course they wouldn't search him because, and he gives this big, long explanation, naturally, of why they wouldn't search Kuroko. So it's really funny. And then from there, Akashi tells them that despite being in Hawaii, it's still a training camp. Teiko has the same expectations regardless of where they are. And so Kuroko's kind of nervous. He's nervous about us going and flying, but Almine, like, makes him feel better. And Almine is, like, really excited to go to Hawaii. He's, like, super pumped up about leaving, getting on the plane and going to this camp and facing these other teams. He's excited by the challenge of facing these other rivals. So their first string members, they're going for 3 nights and 5 days, excluding the 2 days that they use to travel. They'll have joint practices with 3 of the local schools. So Almine narrowly forgets his passport, of course, but Momoi shows up and brings it with her. And then Almine, like, starts trying to challenge Kisei to a race. Almine is like a little kid in the airport. Like, he has all this excited energy about traveling, and he doesn't know what to do with it. So he tries to get Kisei to race him in the airport. And just as they're about to run through the airport, the coaches stop them, and Shirogane, who is going too, punishes them. With that, Almine and Kisei were made to lean against the wall of the airport with their knees bent as if they were sitting in an invisible chair. And the 2 of them began arguing about why they got in that position after that. It's great. The best part about this whole airport scene, though, is that Midorima brought an entire carry-on suitcase of just lucky items. Just lucky items. He, like, brings all the lucky items that he thinks could possibly be used while he's on there. Oh, he's at that tournament for 5 days. I was like, oh my god. And, like, I guess the lucky item for today there in Japan was the toothbrush. But Midorima realizes when he travels that the time zone thing will actually bring about either the next day or previous day's lucky item. So he packs it with him. It's like a noodle strainer. He, like, packs it in his bag. He's like, I'm going to need that for tomorrow. It's absolutely hilarious. I was like, oh my god. I love it. I just love it. So Momoi asks Kuroko at the airport, because they have all those little shops and stuff at the airport. Some of them are like more name brand fancy shops. She asks Kuroko to help her buy lipstick. And at first Kuroko's kind of nervous because he's like, wait, why do you need lipstick? And it seems like he doesn't want to lead her on that they're that close. And I was like, But we find out that it's not for her. it's for her and Almine's mom, right? And she's afraid that Momoi's very innocent in this moment. She's like, I don't know if I'm old enough to buy lipstick. Like, I don't know if I'm like, girl, I was buying lipstick when I was like 10. I don't know why you think that you're too young, but maybe that's a Japanese thing. But she just feels like she's not old enough to get the lipstick. But Akashi acts really mature and cool in this moment and like goes up and helps her pick it out because, of course, which is interesting. His mother passed when he was younger, so I'm like, how did you know about these name brand lipsticks? But I mean, he probably has maybe some female relatives that use them too. But I thought it was a really good moment. I liked the idea that Akashi was really kind and helped her out. And she thanks Akashi and Kuroko for helping her. And Kuroko's like, I didn't do anything. But Kuroko and Momoi both kind of thank each other because neither of them have flown before. And this whole adventure kind of helps take their minds off of like thinking too much about it, right? And we also get in this moment this little preview from Momoi about her concerns for Almine. She says, ever since the qualifying matches for the tournament, Almine has been neglecting something about basketball. Coach Sanada warned Akashi about his behavior, but he wasn't able to revive his old self. However, right after that, Almine was able to renew his passion for basketball again. Momoi thought that was because of his shadow, Kuroko. Because he loves basketball and looks out for his teammates like Almine does, he was able to notice Almine's problem and give advice. No matter how long they've been childhood friends, manager Momoi was unable to get her words to reach Almine's heart. While it is a bit lonesome, she has her own ways of supporting him as manager. Which is kind of sad because Momoi is lamenting. She's like, I can't reach him, but I'm helping other people do what I want to do, which is sad. But also, it shows us that this depression for Almine has been going on for a while now. And it's something that Sanada, the one coach, has noticed. But we all know how that song and dance goes. So, being enthusiastic about basketball again, Almine and Kuroko's combination now rides over the ocean, riding the momentum as they aim for Zenshu. The two of them plan to fully support each other during the league matches in Hawaii. So this is right before the third year in the Ogiwara game. Cool. So as soon as they get there, Almine is super excited. He seems really happy to be in Hawaii. The crew is a bit chaotic. Like, Mura instantly wants to leave and go get food, and everybody's like, it's like herding a bunch of cats as soon as they get out of the airport. And the coach is like, hey, you know, if you guys are good, we might have a barbecue party after the practice. And just like in Haikyuu, just like it, the atmosphere instantly changes. And the textbook says, the light novel says, it's so good. The moment he said the word barbecue, the atmosphere changed. For middle school boys at the peak of puberty, nothing was more appealing than meat cooking. Especially for the training camp participants. They'll say many times, if asked, if you go to Hawaii, there's no problem eating meat because that meat means it's the end of our training in hell. The boys' excitement towards the meat is immeasurable. I love it. I love they're just like drooling over the idea of this barbecue. And so it says, using those feelings towards your advantage is what it means to be an adult. I love it. So they completely take advantage of the boys like lusting after meat and use it as a bribery for them to do well during the practice. What it means to be an adult indeed. But there's a stipulation that the coach is like, if you leave your hotel room during your free time and wander off, you will not be allowed to participate in the barbecue. And so they all agreed to it, but later that day, Kuroko catches Almine trying to sneak out. And he's like, why? Don't you want to go to the barbecue? And Almine is like, well, it's fine as long as I don't get caught. Now, at this point, there's no way to stop Almine. And so Kuroko just decides to go along with him. And he's like, well, fine. We'll just go together and make sure that we get back in time. Right? And so now Kuroko realizes why Almine was paired with Midorima to share a room, because Midorima would keep him in line. However, Midorima's meeting with Akashi, and that's how Almine could sneak out, and that's when we ran into Kuroko. So they go to the beach because they've snuck out because that's where Almine wanted to go. And as they get to the beach, Almine realizes that he's lost Kuroko. And the exact words in the novel are, shit, I lost Tetsu. And so Kuroko was up with him until then, but then what happened was that Almine saw, quote unquote, a glorious woman wearing a bold swimsuit and walked by in front of his eyes, and he trotted along after her. Almine got distracted by boobs on the beach. Big surprise. So Kuroko's so supposedly nowhere to be seen, and he tries retracing his steps, but he can't find him with all the tourists around. So he ends up back at the ocean, and Almine's like, well, I don't know what to do. And then he's like, I guess I could just, swim about the ocean by myself until maybe I notice them. And then he starts taking off his shorts because he has swim trunks underneath them. And that's when Kuroko shows up, of course. And he thinks that Almine is skinny dipping, and he's like, no, don't do it, Almine. And he's like, what? And so we find out that Kuroko, who has this like little straw hat on his head, he apparently ran into this little kid named Hoku, who could speak Japanese and helped him find Almine. And we find out that Hoku's older brother is named Tiki Oshiro and was a player that had lost to Teiko last year. And they're members of Kaluai their school. So they played them in the training camp in Hawaii last year, which Kuroko was not a part of, but I guess Almine was. So anyway, Tiki says he's being scouted by Japanese schools. He's living in Hawaii right now, but the only way he'll consider keep playing basketball is if his team beats Teiko tomorrow in the match. And I'm like, well, you're not going to play basketball again because she's not going to lose. So there isn't really a lot of stakes as far as that's concerned, because the moment he's like, well, if Teiko loses and I can keep playing basketball, I'm like, but they're not because Akashi is there. So, but in any case, he says that if he was a bit taller, he probably could have been scouted in America. But as a short-billed player, T's like, I'm kind of at a disadvantage. But in Japan, I may still have a chance. So I'm going to bet on that. So he very much had to win all the other matches to get to this point. If Kuroko and the others win, Tiki would have to give up on basketball. It's interesting because in this moment, Almine is surprisingly like Kagami in that he doesn't want to hurt Tiki's dreams or see them dashed. Kind of like how Kagami was with Hamuro. And Kuroko remembers back to something that Akashi told him about Almine holding back or feeling like he was too strong for his opponents. He says what he wants is something people think about often. The experience of having basketball, having something precious being taken away from you, isn't something that only goes through you, right? Everybody thinks about it. So Kuroko says that after hearing Akashi's words, he remembers that he had a similar experience too, where he didn't think he was going to make the team. And so he kind of feels, I guess he relates how he felt in that moment to how Almine probably feels now, thinking about Tiki not being able to play. So in any case, he tells Almine to not let, don't go easy on your opponents just because you feel like don't want them to keep playing. It's basically reviewing the same logic that he's done with the popsicle stick down Almine's back the last how many references in the manga and anime. So they basically come up with this strategy with Akashi's assistance, and Teiko ends up like keeping super close to Tiki's school, and they're just back and forth point wise. No team like takes the front running and like rolls with it, right? The score keeps changing. And so they talk about how Tiki is like this really conscious player who's really sharp. He's super talented. And Tiki realizes that he's enjoying playing basketball. And it's a lot of fun playing against a really strong opponent like Teiko, right? And then I love the idea that he says, Daiki, no, Teiko's basketball was beautiful. I'm like, everybody's hitting on Almine, right? It's a good time. I like this Tiki Almine ship that's developing. And so it's great. Like they keep on playing this game, and Tiki like talks about having this inferiority complex and how he wants to go to Japan to play basketball and to keep running around facing these opponents. It's interesting. And in the last minute, there is a pass from Kuroko to Almine that allows them to beat the Hawaiian team. And what we find out is from the pass, it's the first time Kuroko has used the Cyclone pass, and he uses it to Almine. I'm like, oh my god. And later we'll find out, of course, he's going to use that same Cyclone pass to Kagami when he's facing Shutoku and Midorima's team. So they end up having their barbecue party, and Tiki says that since they didn't beat Teiko, he's not going to keep playing basketball. But Almine and Kuroko try to like sit there and coax him into playing it despite the promise that he made at the start of the chapter. And Kuroko especially tries to convince Tiki to like renege on his vow not to play basketball again and to do it in high school. And so Tiki says Tetsuya is really interesting. I can't tell if he's joking or being serious. And Almine is like, Tetsuya is always serious. That's why I can believe in him. And Tiki goes, Daiki. He noticed the change in his voice, and he looked at Almine, and Almine looked into the distance and continued to talk. And Almine tells Tiki, for a period of time, I wasn't able to get into basketball. all my opponents were playing half-heartedly and they weren't a match at all. If I got even a little serious, it'd be overwhelming as a victory. That's no match at all. That's when I get serious in a match. I thought about quitting. With all these feelings, I was tired. It was boring and had no meaning. But it was Tetsu who said, well, no matter the difference in power, no one wants their opponent to take them lightly. And one day you'll be able to find someone that will fight on the same level as you. And he said, and Almine like blushes and says, to be honest, I thought, is he serious? Because everyone we fight gets beaten so easily. I didn't think anyone strong enough would ever appear. But because Tetsu said it, I thought it'd be okay to believe him. Because he doesn't tell lies. And we practiced so hard and we were able to fight against Tiki. And Tiki's like, well, did you enjoy your match? And he's like, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I want to keep playing. And Tiki's like, I feel the same. And then they start laughing. And then Almine is like, oh, I'm going to go get some more meat. Never mind. And Tiki's left with Kuroko, who comes back to the table. And it's like Almine was apparently finishing his large serving of meat and stood up and ran towards the grill. And Kuroko's like, he ate so much and he's still getting more. And Tiki's like, well, that's because it's meat. And so then Tiki says, okay, about Daiki. And Kuroko's like, yes. And Tiki says he might not have any opponents to face in the future. I understood from fighting him. He has this potential hidden inside of him. He's going to get stronger from now on. And that's why the loneliness and dissatisfaction he felt before will only deepen. And that's when Tiki says, but I'm not worried. Because Daiki has Tetsuya with him. And I was like, wait, what are we doing? What are we doing, story? And Kuroko's like, what? And he says, that's right. If it's Tetsuya, then whenever Daichi's suffering or sulking and not having an opponent, you'll go find him and bring back a stronger opponent with you. And I was like, are you predicting the future? He's like, don't worry. He's like, you'll find a way to keep him like with a rival. And Kuroko's like, but find a strong person. We're on the same team. I can't be his enemy. And Tiki only smiles at him, and it's like, what? How are you predicting the future, sir? But there's a reason for that. Because at the beginning with Hoku, the little brother, Tiki says that Hoku is they're descended from fortune tellers. Like his mom's a fortune teller, and that Hoku can kind of see into the future, and it's in their DNA. And at the time, I was like, why are you bringing this up? This is such a random detail. But at the end of the novel, when Tiki's making this prediction that Kuroko's going to bring a stronger player to face Almine, he was making a fortune-telling prediction just like he said his family could. And I'm like, oh my God. Insanity. And so the chapter ends with Kuroko fist bumping Almine. And it's just it's adorable. And it's like, oh, the Teiko stuff that happens in volumes 25 and 26 never happened. Not in this light novel. Never happened. No worries. The fortune teller bit is so great in this chapter, revealing it. I like Tiki's character a lot. He's described as having blue eyes. But he's a really cool character, and I like the relationship he has with Almine. It's really cool. I like the idea of them going to Hawaii. And then it's mainly about all the Almine Kuroko feels. It's wonderful. It's a great chapter. And then the entire story finishes with this bonus chapter called The Gathering of Legends. So it's on New Year's, and Kagetora arrives to this bar with two people. He arrives with Araki, who is the coach for Yosen, and he arrives with Nakatani, who is Shitoku's coach. And it's really cool, right? So they're all talking about meeting up, and they've all been friends. There's this really cool picture of all of them playing high school basketball. It's adorable. I love that Kaijo's freaking out because apparently their coach looked completely different when he was younger, and now he's put on weight and looks older. But they're sitting there talking, and of course Kagetora is bragging about his daughter, showing pictures of her in kimono from New Year's. I'm assuming it's from the New Year's celebration with the fireworks. And we see Araki look at the picture of Riko, and apparently her mom is in the photo too. And Araki's like, it's a good thing that she takes after her mom. I was like, oh my God, the shade. She's like, the shade. And so they basically go to this bar, and what's interesting is that Kagetora, he kind of gets on to them and is like, hey, so what have you guys been up to? And I guess Nakatani is not married, but has no interest in being married. And so he asks about Yosen's coach, Araki, and he's like, why aren't you married? And she's like, well, I just haven't found the right person yet. And at first, Kagetora proposes Kaijo's coach, and she's like, no. And I'm thinking, he's ugly. And she's like, no. She's like, we don't get along. She's like, that wouldn't work at all. And I was like, okay. And then Kagetora proposes To'o's coach, which I'm like, yes, very attractive guy. But she says that until he kicks his habit, she's not even going to consider it. And I'm like, and so then they show up at the pub, and Shirigane's Rakuzan coach, he's just sitting there sipping sake, acting like nothing is wrong. And To'o's coach is trying to like pour all of the liquor down Kaijo's coach's throat. And we find out that To'o's coach was already drunk when this happened. So the bad habit that Yosin's coach is talking about that's preventing her from asking him out is that he gets drunk. She's like, no. And I don't think it's drinking that she has a problem with, because they're all going to the pub to get drinks. But like, To'o's coach is belligerent drunk. Like, it's 6 p.m. and he's toasted. And she's like, he needs to get that under control, or I'm not going to consider dating him. I'm like, good for you, girl. Good for you in standards. Look at you. But yeah, it's such a good chapter. And all of this light novel was really, really good. I honestly absolutely loved it. I thought it was great. I was very excited to be able to read this last novel and see what it all had in store. It was absolutely wonderful. And now I'm sad because there's no more light novels. I could go read the manga, but I felt like this was justifiable enough. Let Kasamatsu be gay. Just let him. I love the idea of them. I feel like Almine was getting really excited about going overseas and facing the opponents because he knows there's going to be a challenge. And for him, that's what makes basketball fun. So he was all about it. But yeah, y'all, I loved these light novels. I'll be honest, whenever I found out there were light novels, I was really worried because sometimes manga and anime, when it's in written form, doesn't work. But I really like the Bungo Stray Dogs light novels, so I was like, I'll give this a try. And it really, each week, exceeded my expectations. So happy about it. So I'm really sad to be finishing the light novels, but I'm so glad that I read them. So next week, we're going to just have the last game manga for Kuroko's. That'll be it. And then we'll be starting a new series. And at some point, we'll hopefully have the character Bible and the other audio dramas as well. So, but I am so curious to hear your thoughts down below. I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. If you get a chance, go on the Discord, read this light novel. It's so good. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Kuroko's basketball.